Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderEd, Blender HD, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Monday, September 26th. And you know what we do on Mondays. We bring in James McCool. It's Mondays with McCool. James McCool, my co-author on the theory of daily fantasy sports. The original Fundamentals Masterclass, 15 hours DFS Masterclass for you. And then we just released the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports for advanced players, 10 chapters of audio, as well as Excel tools built from the ground up by James right here. And I even have a message for you, James, from our Discord, from the RotoGrinders Discord, my Blender's Game Theory channel, from Snellman. Tell James thank you very much for adding player exposure to the portfolio trimmer. Yeah. This is a huge game changer. Made trimming lineups so much faster. I could just look for players that I wanted less exposure to and trim those lineups. Very fast and smooth process. Said he started with 2,000 lineups for Showdown last night, and between the duplication predictor and that, it took maybe 15 minutes to get down to 100. Now he's just obviously it was before the slate. He was saying hoping one of them hits, right? So you did have an update over the weekend, which I tested beforehand. I tried testing on the show live because I'm a glutton for punishment. Just like I'll just transparently, just like, okay, let's see what this looks like. Okay, it doesn't work properly. I guess James has to fix that. Okay, we'll see what happens, right? The old one still works. It just doesn't have these two new features in it. But I like the fact that what we're doing is getting feedback. This is not just like, okay, we made some Excel tools. Here you go. Bye. We're gone. We're off to Tahiti or something like that. That you get feedback from users and saying, oh, yeah, it would work better this way. It would be easier this way. Not saying or fixing bugs in very outlier scenarios. It's like, well, yeah, maybe we didn't realize that someone's using Windows 95 from 1997 or something, like, even though you're not going to be able to use it for that anyway. And the biggest user of the tools? That's me. That's actually me. So, like, I'm the one that's saying, hey, yeah, this works great, but I'd love to not have to cut and paste this back and forth all the time and just see this right in that screen. So on the duplication predictor as well as on the portfolio trimmer, just being able to count your exposure, like how much do you have of a certain player, and then being able to key your lineups in based on that, where instead of me having to cut and paste, sort out my Devontae Adams lineups or whatever, and then just go, okay, now I have to just have those lineups in the portfolio trimmer, and I have to get these 8 lineups down to 5. You could do that even while you have all of your lineups in. You just key on that player. There's a little drop down, select a player, and now whenever you use the trim threshold buttons, it'll only deal with the ones that have that player in it.
Or it'll be with all of them if you choose to have all of them.
Right. Well, obviously. Yeah. You don't sound that excited.
No. I'm excited. I think that those additions were cool. They were kind of hard to put in, and then so I sent them to Blender at like 7:30 in the morning. Right. I was working on them. I started working on them at like 6 a.m. for a couple days straight, and I sent them off 7:30. I was like, hey, here's some new additions. Here you go. Let me know what you think. And then a couple hours passed by. And he's like, here's my update. They didn't work. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. What happened? Like, just go watch the show and you'll see the feedback. Okay. Well,
to be fair, one of the things that didn't work should have worked. I just cut and paste something in the wrong column.
Yeah, you did it wrong. No, I mean, I get it. But it was those experiences are always good. And I did do some cleaning up of my code on the back end. So for those of you that understand how to code in VBA macro, you'll see that I assigned some more variables and I did some things that are cleaner and more correct, but also understand that I don't code to make things clean and correct. I code to make things work. So
No, but you do shave your face to be clean and correct.
Once every 2 years. Yeah, I'm clean shaven right now, as everybody can see. I look like a thumb without a hat on right now, as you can see, completely shaven. I look hilarious when I completely shave. It's like seeing a bear shaved in the wild, just walking around, looking completely weird.
You look much less threatening.
I do look much less threatening. Yeah, I look like I actually am when I don't have a beard. When I have a beard and I'm like tattooed and I'm bald, like people can get some wrong impressions of me, but I'm a really nice guy. I'm pretty soft and I have a small chin. So that's who I am, like underneath the beard. And it'll be weird for like a week and a half. And I think that I had some bad juju this weekend because I decided to shave my beard. And that's why I lost all of my money, was because I didn't have my beard.
That's a good excuse.
Yeah, no. I mean, you gotta have some narratives every once in a while. That's why let's see, my Minnesota stack was absolutely tragically bad because I didn't have a beard. That's why. That's the only reason why. There are no other reasons. So
looking through the chat, give those thumbs ups. You know how much I love the thumbs. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit everything. What doesn't Suki sing? The pair, the early pair here is usual. Doug Montgomery, Bart B, Max Coach, Joe Mack. Good morning. Rob Gardner says, well, DJ A Dog says, y'all got a great product and incredible customer service. Thank you for the course. I'm assuming right, because I tell people when people DM me like, I don't understand how to do this in the tool. I go, you bother James, don't bother me. Right. If you have a problem with the site, like, oh, I purchased this and it didn't download, like, I'll help you with that. But when it just tools wise, I just say, James is the person. I could probably help you, but it's better to come from the horse's mouth. I'm the one asking James, going, well, if I can't do this, like, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
So the only thing I need to know is like, okay, what are your updates? So at least I could tell people. But you have much better customer service than I do.
I do try really hard to have good customer service. So like emails, I have them all cleaned out. I think there's 2 maybe that I haven't responded to today, but usually I'll answer in the morning and at night. And if you guys really have some things to ask, find me in the Discord, because I'm always in the Discord. I don't always check my email. I'll check my email when I have some downtime.
And you talk about the pay dirt Discord, which is
the pay dirt Discord. Yeah. Which it's free to enter. You can go find it over on the site in member tools. There's a free link. But if you DM me on there, or if you ask me something in like one of the channels there, I'll get back to it like pretty much instantly. Twitter is next fastest than email. The thing about it is though that if you have an issue that you straight up can't solve, I'm always happy. I'll just say, hey, yeah, just send me the file with the error in it, and I'll see what's going on. I'll see what's going wrong. And I'll debug it on my end. It takes me a little bit more time to do that, but I'm always happy to do that. The vast majority of the time, it's one of 2 things, or it's one of 3 things. It's a MacBook, which there's a framework issue with VBA on MacBooks that I'm still trying to work out, hoping to have a solve for that this week. It is a not updated Excel, somebody using Excel from 2016 or 2018, or somebody pasted the columns into the wrong columns. Those are like the 3 big things that like I can just open it up. I enable the macros. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Chrome likes to block macros for whatever. There is a link in the change log that you can go to that fixes that problem for the macros. That'll show you how to fix it every single time. There's a link in the change log. But those are the 3 things. Like it's almost always a super simple thing to fix. If it's anything deeper than that, if there's an actual bug, if there's an actual quality of life thing, like those usually come in the next updates. But yeah, I've been really, really trying to be good about customer service, and it's something I do pride myself on. And I always say, and I said when we released, that I'm going to be a good dev about this. There's going to be dev support. There's going to be things that are upgraded and added on and upgraded and everything like that. So I'm glad that everybody is really enjoying it and finding it actionable and talking about how much it's helped their process, because that's been the entire goal here.
Someone in chat, Rob Gardner, says picked up the advanced course last week. Really good stuff. Does James know if the tools will work with Google Sheets with the Solver add-on?
It will not. So Solver is an Excel-specific add-on, not a Google Sheets add-on. So the Solver package will only work in Excel on a desktop. I'm pretty sure. I don't think you can do it.
The Solver you're only using for the simple lineup optimizer, though.
Yeah, and frankly, you should get a RotoGrinders subscription if you'd really like to have an optimizer. I think that it is okay. We've talked about it before. What it does, the Solver package is really, really good as a rudimentary optimizer. It will give you the local maxima lineup that is strong, but not necessarily the global maxima. And it has its limitations. It can only take in 200 variables unless you buy the enterprise package, which you don't have any reason to do that.
Everything else, like the other tools, could be converted into Google Sheets in some fashion. It just depends on how it would work. In I could see the portfolio trimmer, for instance, working in Google Sheets with some adaptation, but the portfolio correlation matrix, can Google Sheets really even do that well?
You can write macros in Google Sheets if you understand how. I'm sure that it wouldn't be that hard to convert the VBA code that I have written into the macro code for Google Sheets, but I have not done enough of it to know if it would work the same way. I think there's a way to convert it, but I can't give any guarantees.
Right. That's why we even say in the FAQ, it's like, this is meant for Microsoft Excel 2021 plus or Microsoft 365 subscription.
Yeah.
If you want to add numbers or Google Sheets or whatever else other program, it's like, if you have the technical know-how to switch this over there, feel free, go for it if you want. But you don't support it naturally.
No, it won't port easily over. And no, Rob, the tools don't all use Solver. The tools are using VBA macros, which is the VBA. VBA is the coding language included with Excel to let you write macros that run and do certain things. So it's kind of like a really dumb version of Python or a really dumb version of R. VBA is basically the worst of the worst in terms of coding languages, but it can do what it needs to do. Solver, on the other hand, is a package add-on that is basically only for doing optimization problems, mostly linear optimization, but like you can, I've used it to do some different kind of optimization problems with things like F1 that can't be linearly solved in Solver exclusively. But yeah, Solver is a package add-on and VBA is the coding language for Excel. They're different.
Okay, you know what can be solved?
What?
DFS
and cash games.
Cash games definitely. I did well yesterday. Both in cash, both sides. GPP made a little bit. I mean, if you're not going to get a top 1% finish, the best thing that could happen is, can you make a small profit or something, or at least a small loss? Then the prize picks an underdog 21-10. I got 2 more going out tonight, so that could increase to 23-10. So I had a good day. Even from a GPP standpoint, like, I'm taking a look at the Millie right now. Obviously, I mean, the biggest thing in the entire slate was the fact that David Montgomery, at 32% owned, gets injured in the first quarter or whatever, and doesn't he comes back as Khalil Herbert, and Khalil Herbert ends up getting basically what we expected David Montgomery to get.
Yeah. I mean, I had David Montgomery in 2 lineups, and I always do that. I always have two running backs that I have diversified across my 3 lineups, and David Montgomery was one, Leonard Fournette was the other. I ended up swapping off of Leonard Fournette late, but I had David Montgomery. He gets injured, and it's like, I didn't even really like David Montgomery that much. I used him to reduce the volatility in my lineups, which, like, I'm fine doing because I play the 150 or I play the 333. Like, I don't need that much volatility in my lineups. And I had Cordell Patterson projected very, very well as well. And like, they were the same cost, right? 5,800 for Cordell Patterson, 5,900 for David Montgomery. And I'm building out my lineups. I'm like, yeah, I have plenty of relative value. I can just go with Dave Montgomery here because I have him and Cordell Patterson basically projected the same. And
you had Cordell Patterson projected the same as David Montgomery?
pretty close. Yeah, I had. I don't think exactly the same, but I had him up there. I had him. Yeah, actually, I wrote him up in my GPP core on the site. I had Leonard Fournette and Cordell Patterson, not Dave Montgomery.
Oh, so Leonard Fournette. Like, I mean, taking a look, I have an aggregate projection up here from yesterday.
Yeah.
Like Patterson 12.61, Montgomery 16.76, Leonard Fournette 18.97.
Yeah,
but the thing is that Patterson, even in the blitz especially, the blitz had a much higher than other places. And that made me hammer the over 41.5 yards on Prize Picks and the over 9.9 fantasy points on Underdog.
Yeah.
And turned out very profitable.
I had Leonard Fournette at 18.4. I had Dave Montgomery at 17.6. I had Cordell Patterson at 16.9. So I had all
lower,
three of
but
those guys.
That's still outside. Yeah, because the blitz didn't have it for that high.
Yeah, I had all three of those guys real close. And they were by far the best values on the slate. I had James Conner up there, but I'm never sold on James Conner. So I was fine with Cordell Patterson. I did end up, after getting just fisted on the early games, I did end up swapping off Leonard Fournette for Cordell Patterson so that I could give myself some chance to min cash. Didn't work out, but he ended up doing really well, and that's nice. But yeah, that 1v1 reducing volatility in a lineup can come back to bite you a bit.
Yeah, I had Cordell Patterson in 1 out of my 85 large field lineups.
Needed more.
And it was in a Bengal stack. I have it right here. Burrow, Higgins, Hurst. I played in large field GPP in all my lines because I picked 10 for my small field from my large field.
Yeah.
Like this past slate, I allowed much more 2 tight end builds.
So did I.
And also running back plus wide receiver combinations without the quarterback.
So
I was running lineups without restriction, just simple stack restrictions, because that's what I do on Friday, right? Friday or Saturday, like Saturday night-ish. And because I'm running like aggregates and running projection sets to see what other people are going to do, especially. And in the aggregate sets, I was getting a lot of like Higbee plus Irv Smith, like that type of lineup, or getting lineups like Mixon plus Higgins, getting lineups like Singletary plus Diggs without Josh Allen, like Miles Sanders plus Goddard type of lineups. And people don't tend to play those combinations as much. And since I'm focusing a lot on combinations, once I group out the combinations that I don't want, because that's what I did. I mean, like, this is the final. I mean, I just left up my lineup HQ just final. You can see how many groups I have in here, right? I have tons of groups. Okay. Yeah. Some of them are simple groups. Some of them are like use it most one of Cook. Like, I typically don't play 2 running backs, the opposing running backs on each side of a game. So it's like Cook and Swift, max 1. I mean, like, that's the type of group. Or I'll have a group like, let's see, like if I'm using Patrick Mahomes, use one of Kelsey or Juju, right? So don't have a Mahomes, Hardman, Valdez Scantling stack.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just like simple stuff like that. But then I also put in my anti-correlation groups, which is basically seeing what the field is going to do and what players are more combined with one another. So for instance, let's see because they're all over the place. Is this all the way at the? No, that's the bottom one. I think I got it in here somewhere. Yeah, the number 1 group was no more than one of Diggs, Fournette, or Montgomery. They were the 3 most correlated players to each other in lineups. So I decided, although I can make lineups with all 3 of them, and then I would have to use ownership max in order to adjust for that. I'm trying to build lineups without having to use a maximum ownership to weed out lineups. Because what ends up happening a lot of times when you're just using ownership sum is that you're just going to get like a 1.2% owned player in an otherwise chalky lineup. And I just don't want to have I don't want to have the 6 same players as other people and then just one. I want to have a 4v4, a 5v5 off of those combinations. And it's very hard to just have an ownership sum and just get me under 120, under 100, under 80 to get that. Because then you just get, okay, you're going to get Diggs, Fournette, Montgomery, and then 3 1% owned players. It's like, no, I just rather have like, instead of 1% owned players, just give me a whole bunch of 8% owned players that in combination. So I decided to go with the max of 1 of Diggs, Fournette, and Montgomery. And then I also had my second level group, because that was the level 1 group. The second level group added Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Cooks, Josh Jacobs, Romeo Doubs, Mac Hollins, Irv Smith, and the Panthers defense. So this was a no more than 2 group. I could have made it no more than 3, but I knew who I was playing more of. Yeah. And you'll see in the fourth group that I made. So this is the second level group. So I'm going to play no more than 2 of these guys in any lineup, right? Based on, and how do I get to these players? Well, I just basically run projections of multiple projection sets, and then I throw them into the portfolio correlation matrix, theoryofdfs.com, and see, basically you could just sort by variance factor, right? See max percent of lineups, and then whoever bubbles up to the top, that's your level 1. Then you have like a level 2 right underneath it. And level 3, you don't even have to worry that much about, because it's like, well, if they're in a max of 6% of lineups, that isn't that high. Right. They're like Fournette, Montgomery, and Diggs got as high as 45% in some portfolio in some projection sets. And then you got guys like Cooks that were coming up at 18 in a lot of, at 16. That's like second level. So they get added to the second level group. And then I also have a third level group that I added Cooper Kupp, Dalvin Cook, Jalen Waddle, Curtis Samuel, Raheem Mostert, Hawkinson, and then the Raiders and the Jaguars defense. And then I set a max 3 on that. So it's like, I don't mind one of each, right? Or I don't mind 3 from one group, or 3 from group. It doesn't matter. Just not all of these together. And then what I also do is I made a group of the most anti-correlative players and say, I want at least 1 to 2 of these guys in in any of my lineups. So out of my 85 set, I had at least 1 of Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry, Travis Kelce, AJ Brown, Drake London, and Miles Sanders. Yeah. The most anti-correlated. And then I built a second one where I'm like, I want 2 to 4. And I add the level 2 of that, which is Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey, Mixon, Higgins, Juju, Damian Pierce, Higbee, and Perriman. Right? So now that's how I'm deciding to build lineups like that. And all that information is coming out, and then I'm seeing what types of lineups. And then I also I wanted to make sure to not play. I didn't want to jam in. Like, I didn't want to have a McCaffrey Henry lineup. Yeah. Right. And I also didn't want to have like a Jefferson Adams line. Like, I didn't want to have Jefferson Kupp. Like, essentially, if you're gonna jam 2 high-priced guys in your lineup, you're gonna be forced to play Mac Hollins or Romeo Doubs or one of the chalkier value plays. And those lineups are going to be much more in combination because you have to play certain players. It's like once you get under, if you're playing 4K, 5K players, or you're playing 6K, 7K players, there's just so much more combinations of them than playing 2 9K and 1 3K and then the punt tight end. Like, there just aren't as many options there. So I set a custom rule in Lineup HQ to give my lineups at most 1 running back with more than 7,000 salary, which covered essentially Mixon, Cook, McCaffrey, Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and then give my lineups at most 1 wide receiver, a tight end to have more than 7,800 in salary. So that's Jamar Chase, Adams, Chase, Kupp, Jefferson, and it also covers Kelsey as well.
And just to clarify, this kind of grouping should be used on slates where there is a lot of shaky value, right? Like this is a slate specific rule that you're putting together. Just to clarify,
this is not something that I would do all the groups and everything I did is all based on me running lineups. On Saturday night for week 4, this could look completely different. I mean, maybe I'm looking to play. We have a lot of 4K options to choose from, or we have a lot of there's a group of 5 running backs in the 6K range that aren't going to be owned in combination as much, so maybe they don't have to be grouped together. It's all dependent on the slate. The value is that I didn't have many 3K wide, the 3K options were sparse and owned. So I did not want to make Kupp. I didn't want to make Kupp Jefferson. I didn't want to make a cousin stack. Imagine trying to make a cousin stack with Jefferson and Irv Smith, and then also playing Kupp or McCaffrey or Henry in that lineup.
Yeah,
it just forces you onto Nelson Aguilar, and it forces you onto Brashad Perriman. It forces you onto a very Jaguars defense, right? Once you make that first decision, your salary constraints alone forces you into other decisions that there aren't many other options for, which means anyone that made the first decision most likely is going to be correlated with the second decision. So a lot of the lineups that have Jefferson, Thielen, Jefferson, Smith, Cousins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, that also have Cooper Kupp in it, almost guaranteed has Mac Hollins or Romeo Doubs in it. Almost guaranteed has Dameon Pierce in it as a cheap running back. It has the Jags defense, because that's the only way. Juwan Johnson, double tight end or something like that. Who else are you going to play? Oh, I'm going to play that same lineup, but instead of Juwan Johnson, I'm going to play Jeff Swaim.
Right.
I don't want him to, no, I want to be more of a 2v. Instead of playing Romeo Doubs, I'm playing who? Someone that's projected 5 points lower for the sake that they're not owned. It's because there's only so many people that are projected well in that range. So that's the reason I set these types of things. And there's no correct answer.
Right.
I just made the judgment call of I'm not thinking about what lineups to play. Maybe this is a better way to put it, because we talk about all the time. That's why we built these Excel tools. You built these things. You built the tools. I envisioned the tools. I was the ideas guy, right? You actually did the work.
Right.
The tools are not there to figure out the lineups to play. It's to eliminate the lineups that you don't want to play. Right? So just like with Snellman or whatever from Discord, it's I put 2,000 lineups in. For the showdown tonight, I'll probably do the same thing. I'll probably put 2,000 lineups of all different types of configurations, right? And go through and go, okay, which ones show up the most? But from a diversification standpoint, I don't want to just play all of some $200 scrapper just because they project for 2 points. And then also throw it into I don't want to play that duplicated of a lineup. But do I want to play lineups that are so leaving 12,000 on the table just because they're not duplicated? No, I don't want to play all my lineups that way. It's so it's a matter of finding the candidate lineups that you're going to choose from, and then finding some way to eliminate that, finding the smaller edges in and of themselves. Well, you could do that from scratch in Lineup HQ by using these settings. But that's why between the tools, Lineup HQ is a generation tool, while the Theory of DFS tools are more of an elimination tool. So I'm just building, I built 300 lineups using these rules, and then got it down to 85 by trimming the bottom, trimming the top, saying, do I really want to have 35% of this guy? Let me trim a bunch of those lineups, right? And doing stuff like that. So this is a way to eliminate lineups, not get to lineups that are better. And when it comes to eliminating lineups, a lot of times you're eliminating on very small edges. So, I'm only playing 85 lineups. I could have built 5,000 lineups. I need to find a way to eliminate how am I going to decide which ones are slightly better than other ones, if they are? Well, I've got to find some way. So, one of the ways I built 300, and and it takes me a long time to do it, so I don't do it. I typically eliminate lineups that have a wide receiver and the team defense in it.
Yeah.
Right. But I can make those groups, but you have to make 28 groups for that. So I just let it build like that, and then I just go through and eliminate those lineups.
Mhm.
Okay, I eliminate those lineups. Imagine if I didn't put these rules in. I could have just gone through and just said any lineup with Cup and with 2 high-priced wide receivers or jams in 2 high-priced running backs. I have 5,000 lineups to choose from. I'm going to get rid of the 1,300 that have that.
Yeah.
Right. And I still am left with 3,700 lineups to choose from. Like, I'm just starting from the point of like, well, I've already decided that I'm going to eliminate by that judgment wise. So I'm just going to put it in to just not build those lineups so I can build 300 that are already weeded out and then pick the 85 from there and then go through. And then that's where like the exposures come from. The exposures aren't like, I want more, I want less. It all comes, the minimum exposures are all the people that are in those anti-correlative groups. And the max exposure are the ones that are in the correlative groups, right?
Yep.
And that's primarily for diversification, because in that group of like Fournette, Montgomery, Diggs, if I don't set a max, maybe I end up getting 70% Montgomery, 10% Fournette, and no Diggs.
Right.
Right, because there's no max. So it's like, oh, Montgomery fits in more lineups than anything else. So whatever. It's like, well, I still want some Diggs. I still want some Fournette. Right. So it's like, okay, what do I cap them? What am I comfortable capping them at? And I just cap them. Right. Cap 20. I don't know. Give me no more than this. Right. And then on the second group, I'm like, okay, level 2, 15, level 3, 10, and then see what comes out. And then once you run it once, and then I do the opposite on the group, like AJ Brown. I want at least, 10, 15%, 15% Henry. I want at least 15% Miles Sanders, 10% Damian Pierce. Because that's the group I'm forcing into. I'm saying I want one of these guys.
Yeah.
But I don't want one of these guys in 60% of my lineups, and then like 4 of the others don't even show up.
Right.
Because that one, just from a point per dollar perspective, just projects better. So that the exposures aren't like I want more than the field or under. They had nothing to do with ownership whatsoever. Just let me get a diverse set of lineups because I'm building 300 and then choosing 85. So I want as diverse. From that point, if I end up, when I ran lineups, I was getting a lot of Romeo Dubs, and I ended up with a lot of Romeo Dubs. But I ended up with 22% in my 85 lineups. But on this original run, he came in at like 40%. And it's like, do I want to have 40% of my lineups with Romeo Dubs in it? No. So I started eliminating the Romeo Dubs lineups.
Yeah.
Right. And as I'm eliminating David Montgomery lineups, I'm getting more Stephon Diggs lineups because of that level 1 group. So like everything just fits together. And I'm just putting lineups together. But I was getting like with those running back, wide receiver, I was getting Leonard Fournette, Russell Gage lineups, Mixon, Higgins, like in my non-capped run of doing this. And when I see that, I'm like, well, why can't I do? Imagine stacking 2 teams, right?
Yeah.
So I have my main stack. So I'm stacking, Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert, which would have been better with Devonta Smith instead.
A little bit.
A little bit. Even though I had some of those lineups. Then I'm like, well, what happens if the Bucks do well? And they're priced so that they're competitive. It's like I'm not playing to overpriced people. I'm playing to underpriced people. So it's like, I don't mind these running back wide receiver combinations, especially when running back sucks. Running back is brutal.
Think about the way that it scores too. Like you can break individual teams down in kind of the same way that I think about showdown lineups, where when I build out a showdown lineup, I'm really trying to think how players interact with each other. And feasibly, when it comes to one wide receiver with one running back, right? We're not talking 2 wide receivers and 1 running back, because that obviously is super negatively correlated. But with 1 running back and 1 wide receiver, the wide receiver can have 160 yards and be tackled at the 1 3 times, and the running back can run in 3 rushing touchdowns from the 1 yard line and still have 100 yards rushing. And like those 2 players still are going to do very well, and the quarterback is not going to do well because the quarterback didn't get passing touchdowns. So there's nothing wrong, I think, with that. I think that it is kind of like people look at it, and it's not one of the like mainstream correlative things that people talk about. but it's not super negatively correlated. Like
It's not,
it's
but
not.
what it is, James. Two things. First off, anyone, if you're let's say I tell you a team scored 56 points.
Yeah.
All their players are correlated to each other. I mean, like
Yeah, because
all
they
the
scored
players
56
on the
points.
same team are correlated to the performance of the team in general.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from a median perspective, so at the 50th percentile, they're all correlated. The players on the same team are correlated to each other. At the 60th, at the 70th, they start losing correlation, but they're still positively correlated. It's like once you get to that 80, 85th, then they start veering apart. So, like, if you play Mixon and Higgins in the same lineup, it's like Mixon could have 24 points and Higgins could have 28 points, right? Nice 80th, 78th, 80th percentile outcomes. That's fine. But if Mixon has 48 points, Higgins has 12. Like,
Right.
once you start getting to the 90th, now they start coming apart. But a lot of times, depending on the price of the players, this is the second point, do you need that much? So, for instance, Jacobs plus Adams is much different than Jacobs plus Hollins.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hollins is only 3,300. He doesn't, like, Jacobs could score 25 and Hollins could score 20. But Adams at his price, Adams 20 points ain't good enough for 8,400. He needs 35, 40 points.
Mm-hmm. And I will also say that I just think in general people overreact to running back wide receiver correlation. Because I got asked a lot of questions. It was week 2 when the Raiders were going to be like popular, right? When it was going to be Devontae Adams like 40% out, and he was. And people were asking me, well, do you think that Josh Jacobs is good enough leverage off of Devontae Adams? And I'm like, honestly, no, I don't. Because even in that 85th percentile, like the way that Josh Jacobs is scoring fantasy points does not necessarily separate him away from the way that Devontae Adams scores fantasy points. And now we're getting
but you do it price wise. Like you
well,
wouldn't play them together because
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So like and this comes with like football knowledge, and we always say that you don't have to know the sport to be able to do well at the sport. And like this is kind of getting into the weeds of things a little bit, but I want to be on a soapbox for a second. So like the way that Josh Jacobs is scoring points, say at 5,500, Josh Jacobs does not get receptions. Like he's not somebody who is going to end a game with like 10 targets and 7 receptions. So he's not taking away the receptions from Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams with a 35% receiving share of like the targets for a team can feasibly get there with 160 yards and 12 receptions and 1 touchdown. And Josh Jacobs can still get there with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that's feasible with the way that those two players interact, even with Devontae Adams being at 8,000, 8,500, he can still get there in terms of an 85th percentile. You're right that a 90th percentile or 95th percentile outcome, whatever, like if Devontae Adams scores 40, Josh Jacobs very likely only scored like 12. You're absolutely right about that. But like, I think that the way that people think about it, and when you say that a player is negatively correlated, or when you say that a player is direct leverage on another player, you really have to think about the way that they score fantasy points and if that negative correlation is enough to really justify the pick as your source of direct leverage. Because there's so many other ways to do it. Like the best way to leverage Devontae Adams is with Darren Waller, because those two literally cannot like that. There's a
but it would also depend. Like and
depends
the
on price.
clearest point here is price,
right? And
right, because Darren Waller's 5,800 and Adams is 8,400. I think another example here is I would say is Jonathan Taylor at 9,000 and Michael Pittman Jr. at 6,900. It's hard, like it's hard for both of them to hit. Like Jonathan Taylor, 35 points means Pittman ain't getting touched. Yeah, Pittman could go 9 for 100 with a touchdown to get 27, but like you're spending nearly 16,000 on both players.
Right.
Like that's one of the main reasons why I didn't play as much of the Buffalo Miami stack yesterday, because of the expense. It like,
And
and it's very similar to the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs, I wanted more of, but it just from a price perspective, like to play that, just it got you into spaces where anyone that's playing that stack is the amount of combinations that are left in the rest of your lineups is much lower. So, like, if you're going to play Allen plus Diggs plus Knox plus one of Hill or Waddle, that's damn expensive, right? I mean, great game environment, everything, blah 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 blah. But from an expense standpoint, like, there was so many one of the ones that I had a bunch of was Mariota, London, Pitts, and then Lockett or Metcalf. And then the other side of the game also. Like, it's just because none of their players are more than $6,000. So, I'd rather those I don't mind. Or even the Bucks. Like, I didn't stack the Bucks, but I had no problem playing Fournette with any of the Bucks wide receivers. I didn't have any problem playing Ramondre Stevenson and one of the cheap Patriots wide receivers. Because it's like, it's like, aren't they negatively correlated? They're not negatively correlated. If the Patriots do well, they're all positively correlated for their 50th percentile outcome. Okay? And now once you start creeping up, like, they're fine at their 60th, they're fine at their 70th, but it's like Ramon at the running back position where I'm expecting running back to be garbage. And it's like, can I get 15 points? Like, Ramondre Stevenson's like 5K.
Yeah.
Like Devontae Parker is 4K. Like, what? I don't need these guys to have 150 yards. They're only 4K. Like, can these guys get me 15 points? Maybe 20? And can they do that together? Sure, why not? How much does it take for a receiver to get 20 points?
Right.
What? 5 for 70 and a touchdown or something? That's 18 points? Like, that's not absurd. A running back to get 15 points, right? 50 yards rushing, 40 yards receiving on 4 receptions and a touchdown. It's like, okay, these aren't like absurd type games. So it's like at their price. Now, if they both were 9,000, then yeah, that probably ain't happening. So like, that's why I was getting these wide receiver running back combinations, even Mixon Higgins, which I thought like was right at that level of like, maybe the expense of them together isn't worth it. So I eliminated a whole bunch of those lineups because I got a lot of Mixon Higgins lineups.
Yeah.
So I eliminated a bunch of them. But I mean, these aren't the types of things I want to highlight. The reason why we make courses and tools. Number one, for you to learn the concepts first, and then how to apply the concepts to specific slates. That it's not like, what exactly do you do? There's no such thing as exactly to do. And then once you apply the concepts to, and then analyze the specific slate, and it's like, well, how do you analyze a specific slate? Well, that's what the tools are for. I mean, like, I'm literally just running lineups. And like, what shows up more than others? And then also the second level is, if it's showing up a lot for me, it's probably showing up for a lot for other people also. So how do I find the balance of like, this is what's showing up the most, this is what's showing up the least, but since people know that, I need to find something that like balances out, like it's not the most, but it's not the least. It's somewhere in the middle that arbitrages that inefficiency. Like, how do you figure that out? You run the lineup. So when people like, how did you know that you could play Fournette and Russell Gage together? Like, they'll look at a lineup and go, and he didn't play Brady in that lineup, and he played Romeo Doubs. And I'm like, I didn't even play Romeo Doubs in that lineup as a run back. I played him because he actually was a projected good value at 3,800 anyway. So why not play them in those lineups? And then like, why am I playing Brady in that lineup? I could play Burrow. I could play Hurts, and AJ Brown in that lineup. Right. And I have a tight end position, and I've Goddard. And it's like, well, you played that lineup and you didn't have a run back from the Commanders. It's like, why do I need a run back from the Commanders? Maybe the Eagles just truck them. I mean, like you don't need these things in a different lineup where I had a spot for a $5,100 player. Maybe Curtis Samuel would have fit in that lineup, but that specific lineup projected better for its ownership without having the run back. That specific lineup, only because of this particular combination of players didn't allow for. I needed to use a $4,700 wide receiver, and it was Russell Gage. But you have Leonard Fournette in that lineup. Yeah, but that still projects better, right? It's like you wouldn't rather have the run back than have a wide receiver running back combination without the quarterback. It's like in that specific lineup, no. In that specific lineup. But how would you know that until you run? I'm running 5,000 lineups. I'm running 2,000 lineups. I'm going through the portfolio trimmer and the correlation matrix and going, which comes up more than not for their ownership. And then figuring out if you made a mistake anywhere. Because if I don't project ownership correctly, like based on this aggregate, a lot of people are going to play this. A lot of people are going to play this guy. Like, are we projecting his ownership too low? And then I'll bump his ownership from like 6 to 9%. Then once I put it at 9%, he comes up about on average.
Yep.
So it's like that 3 percentage point difference matters that much. And I'm like, okay. And then I leave him at 9, and I go, if everyone's going to be using this ownership, they're going to get a lot more of this guy, which means that they're going to end up being more owned than we expect them to be. So I move the ownership to what I expect it to be. Like that is the game that I'm playing. And that's very simply why, like, you could watch these shows. I mean, I do my process even on the shows and go, well, I'm going to do it exactly that way next slate. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to have the same numbers as me. Right? You may have the same projections as me. If you sign up for RotoGrinders, right, you get the blitz or something in NFL, right? You may end up having the same exact median projections and even the floor and ceiling projections as me, but you will never have the same ownership projections as me.
Right.
Because I'm looking through and I'm running, going, this guy's going to be more owned than that. I'll bump him up 3 points. This guy's going to be less owned than that. I'm going to bump. And how do I do that? Do I run that through a tool? Nope. That's just purely, I run it through a tool to go, how many people are actually going to play this guy? Even though he does project highly, but I don't know if people could press that, but like that, to me, that's purely a judgment call. And also depends on the contest that you're playing. If it's a millie, I'm more likely to go with whatever RG ownership says. That's probably fine because less people are looking at projection sources. But when I'm playing the smaller field, the single entry 3-max stuff, the 10 lineups I build for that, screw you. I know Mac Hollins is going to be way higher owned than what we have. I know Romeo Doubs is going to be way higher owned. Rashad Perriman or Nelson Aguilar when Myers got ruled out. Like I know this. So I have to judge those lineups much differently and bump up their ownership and bump down ownership of other people. So like to me, that is the game. You do both of those things together. Like we could both do the same exact process and end up on completely different lineups.
Yep.
Your lineups just lost yesterday. My lineups didn't do that great. I cast 6 out of 10 of my single entry 3-max lineups. And I think I got like a 3 or 4X on like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
Right. So that made that small profit or whatever, but I got nothing in like the top, like top 100 or anything.
I agree with everything you said. It's why you end up with so few dupes in contests. It's because like, even if you have the same process as somebody who's really, really good, like you won't ever have the same exact numbers. So, and I got blanketed this week. I don't play cash. If I'd have played cash, it would have been fine. But got beat in GPPs mostly just because everything is terrible. So that's why. But we'll move on next week.
What were your three lineups? So you played a cousin stack? So just tell me the stacks. It doesn't matter what. Just like.
Okay, I played a Minnesota stack.
Okay.
I played a Philadelphia skinny with just Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown.
Okay.
Tragic. And I played Las Vegas stack with a Derrick Henry comeback.
Okay, so you weren't far off from in my. I mean, I could even show you my 10. I mean, I have them saved. So my 10 lineups, I played a Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert with Curtis Samuel run back.
Yep.
And here, look, Fournette and Gage, same lineup.
Yep.
Right. I would have loved Devontae Parker over Nelson Aguilar in this lineup. Then I played a Stafford Higbee Cup lineup.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And I didn't care about run backs with the Rams. Then I played a Josh Allen, Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs lineup with Tyreek
Sure.
Hill. I mean, I'm still gonna play. How do I get this different, right?
Yeah.
I'm still gonna play it. And this didn't end up having the Patriots defense in it anyway. I mean, these are the lineups I put in, and then I may switch it around. So this is what I originally had.
Yeah.
Then I have Mariota, London, Pitts, right? Then I have Romeo Doubs, Leonard Fournette, Damian Pierce. I had a whole bunch of Damian Pierce.
Yeah.
As a cheap running back, Cooper Kupp in the flex. I mean, this lineup cashed, but whatever. Yeah, I played Cousins, Thielen, Jefferson instead of playing Irv Smith, and so I could play Hawkinson in the tight end spot as the run back in this lineup. Raheem Mostert across from Stephon Diggs, Kendrick Bourne in this lineup, right? So I played a Carr lineup: Carr, Hollins, Adams. I played a lot of Trayvon Burks.
Yeah.
I didn't play much of Henry as a run back in a Raiders stack, but I did play Henry Hollins combinations.
I had the only way, and I was thinking about it because in my breakdown, and when people they asked me if I thought that Derrick Henry was like a good play with Las Vegas, and I just wasn't sold on it until I actually started building lineups and like really thinking through the combinations and thinking through the way that I could make it work. And the only way that I could see Las Vegas reaching what they needed to reach in order for it to be a good GPP lineup was if Derrick Henry did well. Like that Tennessee as a team.
You're talking about classic Derrick Henry, like he'll catch 3 or 4 balls out of the backfield on occasion, and he did. He caught 5.
Yeah, sure.
And he also gets that 86-yard run that blows everything up.
It was the only way that I saw that game being competitive enough that Las Vegas was going to actually have to throw enough to make it work. And it did. I mean, like, things worked out the way that I wanted them to work out, but it just didn't quite get there. And the main reason it didn't get there was because that lineup was Derek Carr, Derrick Henry with Matt Collins, Devontae Adams, which I'm fine with. And then I had David Montgomery, tragic. I had Brandon Cooks as a comeback against David Montgomery, tragic. And then I had a secondary of Garrett Wilson, who got injured, and Hayden Hurst, who had 1 target. So it just,
what was the defense? What was the defense?
Defense was Vikings defense, which again, I'm fine with that. But some weeks you nail it with your little one-offs and secondary stacks, and some weeks
I don't think that's a bad line. No,
I thought it was a really good lineup.
That's a lineup that you could have David Montgomery in. Like, if you're not going to have David Montgomery, you could have Fournette in that line, but obviously Montgomery's cheaper. But yeah, that's the type of lineup that why not? You're not playing Diggs,
and that was exactly my thinking between him or Cordell Patterson, because and the other lineup that I had David Montgomery was Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown. Brought it back with Logan Thomas. It was 2 tight end lineup. Had Logan Thomas and Irv Smith Jr. And then I had David Montgomery, and then I had a secondary correlation of Tyreek Hill and Gabe Davis to leverage Stephon Diggs. I built good lineups this week.
No, but that's fun, especially for the power sweep type. The 1 to 5,000 entry. Like you, dude, I could have built those same lineups.
Yep. And then that one I did end up. I had the Colts defense in that one, which Kansas City passed a lot. And then I did have Leonard Fournette.
You don't have to justify any defense type, but it's just
no.
It's a dice roll at the bottom of your lineup.
Just going through like my thought process on who I choose as the dice roll at the end is like, if I can have it against passing team, I'd prefer that. And then that one did have Leonard Fournette as well. But I thought that I had enough. With a 2 tight end lineup, not enough people make 2 tight end lineups. So I thought that it was fine, and I had the leverage off Stephon Diggs with Gabriel Davis and the leverage off Jalen Waddle with Tyreek Hill. So, like, with those leverage points in there, I thought that it was
Waddle and Hill was leverage. They both were about the same owner.
I had Tyreek Hill projected at half the ownership of Jalen Waddle, and he came up higher. So, but my thought process on all of that was, okay, it's fine for me to have David Montgomery and Leonard Fournette here because I have enough leverage and like indirect leverage in my lineup built in. I thought that was fine. If I had known that Tyreek Hill was going to be 16% owned, which I thought he was going to come in around 10% owned because he was so much more expensive than Waddle, I would have played Cordell Patterson and Leonard Fournette instead of having David Montgomery in this lineup.
If I would have known Miles Sanders was going to be the 3rd highest owned player on the slate, I would have played much less of. I had him as an anti-correlative play and he actually turned out to be a correlative play. Like that's the worst. That is the worst.
Yeah, I had him at
like
22%.
To me, like this is how I review. I look and when I look here, remember the way that I review play is what I've done, and now that I have the information, I'm not talking about the player performance, but now that I have the information of what my opponents did, would I have done anything differently?
Right.
Yeah, Miles Sanders would have made the level 2 correlative group instead of the group 1 anti-correlative. Like, dude, I would have barely had him. I would have had so much more Damian Pierce or Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
Had I not I didn't. Miles Sanders. What was his aggregate?
I had him projected at 23% ownership.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, 11.5 in the aggregate.
Yeah, I had him projected at 23. I had, in terms of the highest overall running backs that I had projected, I had Dave Montgomery projected at 29.5. I had Damian Pierce projected at 25. Leonard Fournette projected at 22, and Miles Sanders projected at 22.
Yeah, I did not have that.
Yeah, it doesn't. But to go back to your point of like this is how both of us review lineups. Like my statement of if I had known that Tyreek Hill was going to be 17% owned, I wouldn't have played David Montgomery in this lineup. I don't think that I had enough leverage in this lineup with Tyreek Hill being that highly owned. But like the actual plays themselves, like I don't enter a lineup unless I think it's a really, really good lineup. I only got 3 bullets to work with. So I'm making I'm really making sure that my decisions are sound. And after the slate, like I have already picked the players that I thought were best for those lineups. And if it turns out that one of those players is significantly higher or significantly lower owned, I think that was a mistake on my part of process, because I wouldn't have done that the same way. Right. The second lineup, that lineup, I think is the only one that I would have done differently, because the Minnesota lineup had plenty of leverage and I thought was built out really well. So I'm happy with 2 of the lineups, but that Tyreek Hill ownership, that's
well, the same thing with me. Like the number one thing that I look at my lineups and go, these lineups would look, the Sanders lineups would look different. I mean, like why am I, and I would be diversified and end up with less Sanders than having more Sanders. So like that, to me, that's the main thing I take away from this. In the chat, go through some YouTube questions before we get out of here. Hit the thummy thumbs. You know how much I love the thummy thumbs. Matt Meir says, I find that you need to do a lot of the type of analysis Saturday night because Sunday increases the risk of technical issues. Yeah, there was a problem before lock with the lineup HQ. I saw it didn't affect me. I guess I got mine in before that happened. I mean, all that analysis, like that, all the correlation analysis, I do. The only time that I will not do it Saturday night is if there's compelling news that will dramatically change this. If it's the type of thing where once we get this news, this guy could be 30% owned.
Yeah.
Like then I'll wait. But outside of that, there was nothing that was pending. Well, is Julio going to be active or not? Like, it's not going to change that much. Like, it's not going to change that much. Like, is Jacoby Myers going to play? It's not going to change. Yes. We're going to get a bump to Aguilar. You're going to get a bump to Bourne. You're going to get a bump to Parker. But is it going to be something where, like, their ownership goes from 3% to 30%? No. So, like, I'm just going to run it beforehand. And then when I build my lineups, I get up at like 9 in.m. and I put in all the groups. I'm doing all that with the morning aggregates of projection sets. So typically I'm getting those at 9:30 in the morning. And I don't, truthfully, if any inactives that changed anything, I'll manually change. I'll just manually do it. So all my lineups, my 300 lineups, candidate lineups that I got down to in lineup HQ, I already had it like 11 o'clock.
So I have a question for you. How are you going to handle NBA with this?
With what?
With a process of using the correlation matrix.
It's gonna. Let's see. Let's see. Because it's yeah, you're right. I know. I don't know. Let's see.
It's gonna, dude. I am, because I have a process for the things that I build out too. And usually it takes me most of the week. I'm building things out on Saturday. I'm testing combinations. I'm looking through the things that I think are going to make the most sense in terms of the lineups that I build, and then I hand build on Sunday. And it takes me about an hour to get through and make all the decisions that I need to make. But for NBA, we're going to get news 10 minutes before the slate locks that will take somebody from 3% to 30%. That absolutely will take somebody from 50% to 5%. Like that, these things will happen, and that is going to be hilarious. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it yet.
Right. I don't know either. That's why I just like I'll trial by fire. Who knows?
Another question.
We have Paul Adair says in the chat, I use the tools, the Theory of DFS tools, which you can get at theoryofdfs.com, to build 3 single entry lineups. Ended up doing well with a Hertz lineup stack. I need to dial it in. Was getting tons of Pierce yesterday, but ended up working out. Well, I got tons of Pierce also.
Yep.
Right. I had him lower ownership projected than you did. That's why I said the numbers matter. The tools aren't going to. The garbage in, garbage out. You want to change all the numbers, you're going to trim, you're going to smart trim, right? If you're like, no, if you put Miles Sanders at 5% owned instead of 12% owned, you're going to get him in like 80% of your lineups with smart trim. If you put him at 22% owned that he comes in at, you're barely going to get him in anything. Yeah. Like literally, it's going to start wiping out all those lineups and give you giving you Mostert and Stevenson and Cordell Patterson and those types of guys. So like the numbers matter. So it's not like the tools aren't doing anything. It's like it's all based on the numbers that you're putting in. And Rob Gardner asks, what's the best way to practice game selection without massive sample size? There isn't. Do you ever do regression analysis on contest scores? No. I love GPPs, but they're so high variance, especially with only a 2 to 3% ROI. If you're only getting a 2 to 3% ROI long-term in GPPs, then you're a very bad GPP player.
So here's...
do you want to answer all three? You want to answer each question individually?
Yeah. Okay. So the same way that you just did it, what's the best way to practice game selection without a massive sample size? You can actually go back if you have a database of projections that you have built up, or if you have a database of projections that you have saved, you can go back and you can grab CSVs and you can actually do some simulations of the contests if you would like to. You have to be very technically advanced to do it. It's something that I think there's a handful of guys that know how to do in the industry, and they end up doing very well because they know how to do it. There is a way to do it, but you can't cheat a sample size. You have to have the sample in order to test it. That said, you do not have to have played all of those slates, but you do need to have the sample. Do you ever do a regression analysis on contest scores? Absolutely not. Contest scores don't actually matter. And then I love GPPs, but they're so high variance.
Well, hold on. Contest scores don't matter because like one slate you could score 180 and not even cash, and the next slate you score 180 and win the Millie Maker.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so like the actual the main concept as described in both the Fundamentals Masterclass and this one, which is one of the most it's probably the most important concept in DFS, is that your goal is not to score the most points, but to score more than your opponents.
Right. And
right.
That's why
scoring more than your opponents means that either you're scoring or they're not scoring, which means we have those NBA slates where, oh my God, 360 points and I only 1.5x my money, and so you needed a 440 because all the chalk smashed. And then you have another NBA slate where you score 350, you scored 5 points less and came in third place in the large field GPP. Like doing regression analysis on those things, what would that wouldn't accomplish anything because
right. So that's
scores themselves don't matter.
That's the thing is anytime that somebody asks me, or I'll have somebody offhand say like, oh, well, usually, you need 300 points to win an NBA GPP. And now you need like 350. It's like, yeah, because people got better. Like the crux of it is that focusing on thresholds and focusing on points is not what you need to be a successful DFS player. You have to beat the field. It doesn't matter what the score is to beat the field. You need to beat the field. So that
James, Rob's been here before, so I know. So that's why I'm answering his questions like he's not stupid because he's not stupid. He's not talking about. He's saying in the chat, he's not talking about like different slates, right? Because obviously, if you're using a term like regression analysis, you're not stupid. So like you have to know that the contest scores don't matter. You'd understand that concept. Talking about more of the in the money and lowest the win score of like a single entry contest with 100 people has a lower win score than a $10 single entry with 1,000 people. Like conceptually, do you have to even do any of that? Because that's all true regardless. What you would have to do if you wanted to do anything more detailed, you'd have to simulate the contests themselves with the ownership of the individual contests.
Right.
Because that's what we talk about. Oh, I mean, it's talked about in the course all the time of that. The ownership around the industry typically is for large field GPPs. So if you're playing single entry 3-man, if you're playing the 333 500 man in NBA or something like that, like, dude, the 78% owned value play is going to be 95% owned. Like, at what point is that past equilibrium or under or over equilibrium? It's going to differ from contest to contest. So simply just regressing contest win, like what was the cash line and what was the winning score line, doesn't actually tell you anything without, like, how would I have been able to build lineups to achieve those things? It would be different from contest to contest, depending on the ownership of the players. The reason why winning scores tend to be higher, the catching scores tend to be higher in single entry, is because people tend to play chalkier lineups, and ownership is typically correlated to performance to some degree. It may not be the most degree. The more owned players are typically the better plays. So like and if they're going to be higher owned, if in NFL yesterday, right? If Stephon did, I mean, a lot of the chalk didn't hit, but like you're going to see a lot of David Montgomery, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Irv Smith lineups. So like the total score of the contest is going to move very heavily on these players because in those contests, it's even heavier. David Montgomery may be 40% owned, and Leonard Fournette is 38% owned, and Amon-Ra and Diggs are 40% owned. So like the whole, like so many lineups are moving with the same types of players that like comparing that to then the Millie Maker, well, less lineups are moving with less players. So unless you have a way of simulating with that owner, with the individual ownership and all the lineups in it, that's the only way. What just complete, because what he wants to do, and it makes sense. I would think basically to do that also of like, well, I'm gonna look back 5 years of DraftKings contests, right? And I'm just gonna compare the $100 SPY to the Millie Maker, and just all I'm taking down is the score, the cash line, and the winning score line, and the ratio. Like, you know, because obviously you control it for each slate. So like the ratio for each slate, and then see where if there's an inefficiency there. The problem is that you're comparing apples to oranges because the ownership of one contest is different than the ownership of. It'll all depend, that ratio on a slate where, let's say on a slate where most of the chalk hits, you'll find that the ratio is much smaller because in the SPY, the scores are going to be way higher, and the cash line in the Millie may actually be very low in comparison because less people are playing chalkier lineups because there's less owned play. I mean, like the 48% player in the SPY is only 32%, and when he puts up 50 points, like half the lineups in the SPY are coming along with it, while only a third in the Millie Maker. Right. So, like on a slate where the chalk smashes, you'll see it's like, wow, I should play tons of lineups in the Millie Maker because these people are not making good lineups because this SPY lineup, you know, played whatever. And then on a slate where like all the chalk fails, the ratio is like you start thinking the opposite. You go, wow, the cash line for the Millie Maker was higher than the cash line for the SPY. And it's like, yeah, because so many chalky lineups are moving together. So like you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to plot that out without, you know, having some way to account for.
So
that ownership. contests.
I will add in one thing here that I think that I agree that it's worthwhile to do that, to go back and look at the ratio. But you really, like Blender is saying, you have to take into account how chalky the lineups are. You could probably do that and then also not only note down what the in the money score was and what the win score was so that you could develop that ratio, but you would also want to take down what the average product sum of the lineups that were in the money ended up being. That would be valuable because then you can make a comparison of the ratio between the product sum of the lineups as well as the ITM and winning score.
The problem, the hugest problem of this, the reason why I say it's worthless to do this, because it's only descriptive. It's not predictive. So, like, for instance, like let's say you got this information. You're like, I found the correct ratio or whatever. The goal of why Rob is doing this is like, I want to be able to game select better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, well, is the slate coming up going to be, is the chalk going to smash or not? Like, you don't know that. So like, if you don't know that, then it's like, well, if the chalk smashes, it would be much better to enter these contests instead of that contest. But if the chalk fails, it would have been better to do the opposite. But you don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know that it can, but if you can develop an idea and an intuitive sense of when the chalk is good or bad, then this is very valuable.
Okay,
that's what I think.
Believe in good or bad chalk.
Yeah, I think
a better way. I hate using good or bad chalk. It's like when certain players are going to be way over-owned or way under-owned.
But like you can. Okay, no. But you can look. I think that
let's say, like, James. Let's say, for instance, I'm using an extreme example.
Sure.
A very extreme example. Let's say yesterday.
Yeah.
You knew for a fact that in the Millie Maker, Keelan Cole was going to be 50% owned.
Okay.
And in a single entry, he was going to be 90% owned.
Yeah.
And then you look at his projection of like 2 and go, are people on crack? I mean, like right, like that type of thing, right? Yeah. You do that.
Sure.
Like, obviously, this is an extreme example. That a guy projected at 2 for 3K is not going to be that old. But let's just say collective, there's something in the air. There's poison in the air. There's laughing gas. Everyone's doing that. And you're like, well, there's so many people that are willing to sacrifice 10 points of projection and get 1 million points of ownership. How do I take advantage of this? Is it better then it would be so much better to play like the single entry stuff, because they'll be even more like the lineups are going to be even more right. You understand? Like if you're playing a 90% owned guy, pretend it's an injured player.
Yeah.
Right. We don't even have to say Keelan Cole. Let's just say 99% of your single entry field was going to automatically take a 0, and they're happy to do so, or 50% of the Millie is happy to take a 0. Well, that means that you're competing with 50% of the line. Like if there's 240,000 entries in this contest, 120,000 are still playing lineups that don't have a 0 in it, right? So you still have to compete against those. But in your 1,000-man single entry, right, and you may be competing against 10 lineups.
Right.
Like, because the 990 other lineups are like, yes, we're playing the 0 for the high-owned 0 at $9,000 salary for no reason.
Right.
Like, but I'm using the example to show that's if you knew that there were going to be very heavily over-owned players or under-owned players, it would make more sense, for instance, from a leverage standpoint, to play more single entry 3 max, but also understand that there's so many bad lineups in a large field contest as it is, that regardless of if that ratio is good or bad, you're playing against weaker players. So the simple fact that people are building lineups that are nowhere near equilibrium, like, pay for the rake.
Right.
While in the small field contest, there's enough people that are sharp enough to even build around a high-owned player that your edge is not as dramatic as you think. That's why simulating simulating the contests it's way more precise than trying this, like doing regression analysis on these very blunt things. I think it'll end up, to me, I view it intuitively as whatever information it tells you, it's more likely to be wrong than be even directionally correct. It may actually just be wrong.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay. Sean Smith says he used the trimmer for college football this weekend and took down the afternoon slate for 10,000. Held off whistles and did it with only 10 lineups.
I had a sub take down 125K yesterday. Wildcat. It was awesome.
Stoked. Yeah, no, I same person.
Oh, cool. Good.
Same person. I got a DM from them saying thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Stoked on that.
Okay. Hit that thumbs up button as usual. I'll be on the pre-lock show later today. So for Showdown tonight, Giants Cowboys. It has to be able to beat the Broncos game yesterday. Jesus Christ. Boy, what was that? I didn't play. You know what made it more enjoyable?
You didn't play?
I didn't play the slate at all. So I was just able to just like sit back and go, these people are I'm not talking about DFS players. I'm talking about the coaches and the players. Like, this is Jimmy G stepping out of the back of the end zone. Right. Russell Wilson throwing balls 40 yards off of me. I'm just going to watch it. This absurdity.
Terrible. Well, there's always money to be made in Showdown. I'll have my Showdown season article out on the site as well. So people have been enjoying that, and those are fun. So,
and you can find James on Twitter at paydirt_DFS or on paydirtdfs.com. You can join his Discord for free. You could join our Discord at RotoGrinders. You get everything you can get, all the lineup HQ, all the projections, all everything. We'll have the Showdown simulation tool, the Slate IQ, we used to call it. For premium members, I'm always in the Blenders Game Theory channel in there for RotoGrinders premium members. We got barely a baseball slate. I mean, I think we probably are still doing up Grinders Live. I think there's only 4 games today. And we got live locks on the Scores and Odds channel, all the NFL content, the Guildcast on the podcast feed. We got podcast feed. We got YouTube channels. We've got everything. I'll be back later with Justin STL cards, 7:30, 7:45 or so to go over the Showdown slate. And then we'll talk more about the NFL using the tools and answering your DFS strategy questions, as I always do, Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern, here on RotoGrinders.com.